Successful trading with experience has a lot to do with nuances. One of the nuances that we cover every time that we do a preparation or a replay is overnight inventory. I was surprised when I began talking about inventory. I've not heard anyone else talk about it. And I was amazed at how many senior traders were not aware of the impact. And maybe it is that other markets that are all electronic, it's really hard to get your hands around the inventory. When we're trading the ES or markets that we can actually see the overnight inventory and measure it fairly correctly, it is an important consideration. So the first is, and we've written this down because people always have trouble remembering this, but it's important to listen to what I say. Just use what is written as a checklist. Okay. Overnight inventory occurs relative to the settle price or also the unchanged price from the previous session. If overnight inventory or overnight trade occurs above the settle price or the unchanged from the previous session, then overnight inventory would be considered long. If overnight inventory trades below the settle from the previous session, overnight inventory would be considered short. Now, it's not always that clear cut that it's either 100% long or 100% short. If it's basically balanced, which is about the same amount, of trade above and below the settle, then don't worry about overnight inventory. When you are interested is when it's clear that overnight inventory is either long or short. If overnight inventory is long, for example, approximately 65% of the time, and that is an anecdotal number. It's not something that I have scientifically measured over extended periods of time. But if overnight inventory is long, the expectation is that we will adjust overnight inventory. How would you adjust long overnight inventory? You would see some selling. That selling is also referred to as a counter auction. If overnight inventory is short, the odds are we would expect a counter auction. A counter auction to short overnight inventory would be a rally. One of the most misleading events occurs when you have a correction or a counter auction to overnight inventory, and you mistake that counter auction for a more sustainable move in the underlying security. So for example, if overnight inventory was short, the expectation is for a counter auction or a short covering rally. If that short covering rally occurs and there's no upside follow through, all you had was old business. The covering of short positions is considered old business, just as the liquidation of existing long business is considered old business. If you have a counter auction to short overnight inventory and there's no follow through, then that correction to overnight inventory weakens a market. The big mistake comes when you're following price and you mistake that price movement to the upside, which is old business, for something more substantial. Likewise, if overnight inventory is long and you get liquidation, which is old business, not joined by new business, but you mistake that liquidation as a weak market, then it is a very difficult day for you. It's important that you think about and understand overnight inventory in each session. It's a nuance. And it's important to understand, if you don't get the expected reaction, that also is very valuable information. The counter auction is up. You expect to see that counter auction to the upside, and instead the market trades lower. The information you're gaining there is that the market was fairly weak because it didn't correct that inventory. Likewise, if overnight inventory is short and the market doesn't rally, that's a market that's fairly weak. Overnight inventory is long and the market doesn't break, that's a market that's fairly strong. Go back, review what is written here, and every time you do your preparation for a market, think back and reflect on the importance of overnight inventory.